It is Tuesday, May 7th, 2024. This is another edition of Football Today. You know those two dudes from the Talking Giants world, Bobby Skinner, Justin Penik. I am Chris Rose. Producer Mikey is here as well, as we are going to break down another division, this time the NFC West. That'll be coming your way momentarily. But first, over-under on number of swear words is 1,078 over the next 60 minutes or so, because we have to try and keep pace with at least the first 7 minutes of the Tom Brady roast.
I'm effing excited for this effing NFC, and the F stands for effing. No, I'm actually really excited to talk about the NFC West.
Me too.
I mean, I guess that's why we're talking about them early, is because they are a really good division. Even the Cardinals, like I have some takes on.
Yeah. I mean, that's the fun thing. We know that not every team is going to be good. In fact, there will be a handful that are flat out miserable. And by November, we're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe we have to watch their full game. But that's the way it goes in this league.
Hey, I'm excited for the Cardinals' offensive core. I think they're a nice little fantasy football team.
Ooh. Now that's interesting. That's very interesting. We are going to start off with a couple of topics before we dive into the NFC West. First thing is that Odell, on the cusp of signing a one-year deal with the Miami Dolphins. The reported figures are, it sounds like $3 million, could be a shade over $8 million if he reaches his incentives. First of all, let's start with this, Penik. Do you love the fit?
Love is a strong word for a player that really hasn't been relevant stat-wise since 2019, which, Chris, I mean, I'm doing the math. If you have a kid that's graduating school right now, they were a freshman. In 2019, I was like a junior and a senior in college. So I like it from this standpoint. He's not going to be asked to be the number one. He's the number 3 option, if that, right? And this is also an offense that runs 45% of the time out of 11 personnel. That has to be one of the lowest rates in the NFL. 42% out of 21 personnel, 9% out of 12. So I really hope Odell's not at the point of his career where he's going to get upset if he's not on the field. And if he's not
going to be on the field unless Waddle or Hill gets injured.
Right, because they run so much 21 and 12 personnel. Yeah, man, I don't love the fit, but I like it from the standpoint where Baltimore, he was kind of asked to maybe be the number one. Say Flowers obviously had a better rookie year, but I like the fit.
Yeah, for as disappointing as his season was last year, he was still like the second leading receiver on that team with 565 yards. He only had 35 catches. If you just remove the name from it and like, okay, player A, like, okay, this is a nice depth signing for the Miami Dolphins. But again, it's just he's not even close. Like when he was with the Rams, was he what he once was? No. But he still was like really important and still valuable and good. With Miami, it's just like you said, when they go like Braxton Berrios, like is their main slot guy.
Yeah.
Now they'll move Tyreek and Waddle in there a little bit, and that's where you'll give Odell some run. But they added Jonnu Smith, so they're going to do some more 2 tight end stuff. So he truly is depth, right? And if he had 35 catches and 565 yards on a team with the MVP quarterback and was actually needed on that team, like it's going to be a lot lower than I think he's just going to be a red zone like contested catch guy at this point if everyone's healthy. If Tyreek or Waddle goes down, then obviously he's a little more valuable. But that's what a depth guy is.
So maybe the better question is, what is his legacy? I mean, he's going to play a few more years, probably where he goes from team to team to team. So at the end of the day, what is it, Bobby?
It's just a great player who fell off quickly, right? I mean, he was on pace for a Hall of Fame career. You know, like the only like through his first 4 years, the only receiver who like rivaled him statistically was Randy Moss. And it was in, me and Justin got to see it up close and personal. And then it got derailed by injuries and his own bullshit, right? Like that, the injuries started to pile up and people didn't want to put up with his bullshit, whether that was the New York Giants, whether that was your Cleveland Browns. Played nice with the Rams for a year and then got injured in that Super Bowl. And then last year with the Ravens got paid $18 million to not do a whole lot for them. And then now he's just a true backup on the Miami Dolphins. So he's a great player, not going to be a Hall of Famer, but he will be remembered as a great. And he had a huge impact on just like the youth of that beginning of his career too. Like no one's no one's gonna look back at Odell's total stats and be like, oh, that wasn't that good of a player, overrated. They're gonna look back and say, hey, if he would have stayed healthy, he would have been a Hall of Fame player.
I think you're still seeing the legacy impact right now, where I think the NFL world did actually a good job of not overreacting to the signing and be like, "Oh my God, look at this! Look at this trio! It's one of the best ever!" Blah 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 blah. The NFL did a good role of not making this such a huge story, but you still had a fraction of people that grew up with Odell Beckham Jr. worshiping Odell Beckham Jr. And I don't even mean that as like a slight to anybody. There were, NFL people became NFL fans because of
You saw that haircut all over the place.
Yeah, he was the NFL for a hot sec for a little bit, and rightfully so. Like he carried some really bad football teams to some good wins. Giants probably won like 4 games in 2016 without him. But anyway, I think you're still seeing the legacy where it's going to be one of those things of we'll look back on it 10, 15 years from now, and people are still going to worship Odell Beckham Jr. And you'll see a couple times a year, one of those aggregate accounts will put out Odell Beckham Jr. highlights during the months of June and July when it's the slowest time of the year. It'll get a couple thousand likes, and then it'll be like, wow, remember that, remember that, remember that. I think, unfortunately, that's the legacy of Odell Beckham Jr., and it is followed with, and it's kind of ended with, what if?
And I don't think anything post Rams is going to affect it negatively, right? Like all the positive and negative stuff, which should be talked about, happened within that time span. Like anything after that Rams Super Bowl really isn't changing, pushing the needle one way or the other that much.
If anything, it's gravy. Like if somehow the Dolphins get on a great run and he does something big in the postseason, then it kind of can cycle back a little bit. I think part of his legacy is something that we as football fans are not even privy to. And I think it's when he walks into a locker room. There are people that he is playing with that look at him as though he's a football god. And I'm not telling them whether or not that's right or wrong. Part of that feeling I got when he exited Cleveland in kind of a messy fashion, right? Remember the tape that his dad put out, the video his dad put out on social media about,
I mean, he spent the whole season pouting around, basically begging for the Browns to get rid of him.
Right. And so if you're a teammate, I think a lot of teammates would be like, God, this is bullshit. Like, we need to clean this out and move on because we have to move on as a franchise. If you remember, and I certainly do, there were a ton of players who said, remember, Odell got asked to leave before he got cut. It wasn't like, all right, he's out. It was, we've sent Odell home today, and we're going to kind of figure it out. People were asking the players, would you accept him back in the locker room? Remember, I was like, of course. He's family. You know what nobody did? Was go to bat for Baker. Now, I know that part of that is because maybe
that's the issue with Odell. And that's part of the arguments I would used to get into because obviously I'm connected with the Giants, is that's part of the problem because a lot of times the argument is like, well, the locker room loved him. I was like, yeah, that's the issue because now they follow along with his bullshit and they pick sides. And now you have a divisive locker room, right? It's not if people just called out his bullshit, right? Even if you had it, it wouldn't be an issue, right? Like I remember I interviewed Brandon Jacobs a handful of years ago, right after the interview with Josina Anderson. And I was like, what would have happened if that happened with you guys, right? And that was a team full of leaders, right? Strong guys who like some dogs. Like we wouldn't have put up with that shit, right? That would have not happened with us. The issue is he was the leader on that Giants young locker room, and that spread to where this guy is now having issues and this guy's having issues, and now they're against the coach and against the quarterback. So a lot of times people use that as a defense. Oh, locker room loved him. To me, that's one of the biggest issues is there's assholes and pains in the ass in all locker rooms. But those guys can get dealt with. With Odell, it kind of never was dealt with until teams finally had enough and said, we don't want you on our team anymore.
Well, in fairness, we didn't hear boo with the Rams other than great things. And you didn't hear anything from the Ravens. In fact, they applauded him.
And that's how it goes.
Leadership.
Guys are on their best behavior for 1 year.
Right.
And then, the longer, so that's where he needs to just be on 1 year contracts. And even then last year with the Ravens, it was hard to say much because they were so damn good. But even within that, right? I mean, remember we talked about it on one show where he's he didn't get a touchdown in some end of the game blowout, I think, versus the Cardinals or something.
It's still there, man.
And he's he's on the sideline complaining. So
the effort thing in the playoffs, like basically handing the other team, it was a bad decision by Lamar, but Odell Beckham Jr. giving up on a play near the red zone in the playoffs, and then Lamar Jackson throws an interception to the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's part of a game changer. And Jeremy Fowler did report, says that OBJ, and this is just one of these things, says that OBJ believes that Mike McDaniel will get him the ball. But you just look at you would think the Miami Dolphins were, you guys were on this show earlier in the year, and rightfully so, giving Miami Dolphins the beginning part of last year's Miami Dolphins offense comparisons to the greatest show on turf. And they're not doing it running out of 11 personnel 80% of the time with the great wide receivers they have. They're doing it out of like rushing formations and having like a 50-50 split of throwing the ball on 12 personnel and throwing the ball out of 21 personnel, where they're running at 50%, throwing at 50%. They mainly throw it out of 11, but like where is he going to get those targets? Where is he going to get on the field? And it's one of those things of, Odell Beckham Jr. at this point, I don't think he's going to make such a big stink out of it, but there were little signs of it. And then even the effort stuff that we talked about in Baltimore, it's still there, even though it kind of shouldn't be.
Okay, let's move on from a guy who could have ended up in Canton to a guy who will, and we're just going to do this one real quickly. J.J. Watt was at a charity softball tournament over the weekend. I think it was his, actually. And he came out with this quote. I told D'Amico Ryans last year, don't call unless you absolutely need it. But if you ever do call, I'll be there. Are you paying attention to this at all, Penik?
Yes. I don't think it's going to happen, but because he didn't, I wonder what his contract situation was with the Cardinals. Bobby, look it up if his contract was up with the Cardinals and if he could just sign with the Texans right away.
I'm pretty sure he can.
If a team is in the postseason, and if even Les Snead came out and said this about Aaron Donald,
he can.
Too, where if you're in a postseason run, call up a guy. It's like for 4 weeks, just play like a bat out of hell. If J.J. Watt's taking care of his body. But Chris, this is where I'll throw it to you. You talk to athletes every single week on the Chris Rose rotation. The mindset of a competitor, right? Wanting to compete, wanting to win, wanting to be back with the guys in the locker room. I think it's like a drug. And I think J.J. Watt has to walk away, especially with this time from Houston. I know you got to know how much Houston means to him, played his almost entire career there. He never really got the job done there. So talk to me about that. Like, I can imagine J.J. Watt, like, it's like a drug where he kind of just wants it back. He felt like he just fell short of it in terms of timing there with Houston.
I think football is such a different sport because of how much you have to give with your body. I just do. Like, it's one of the questions I ask guys is like, how much does it hurt playing football? And Andrew Hawkins gave me the best answer about it. He was like, Chris, everything that we do hurts. Like, I can't explain it. He goes, but every time you get off the line and you're pushing off something, they're like, okay, your knee hurts, your back hurts. And then the minute somebody bumps you, you hurt. And the minute the ball gets thrown to you and you get crunched by two guys, it really hurts. Like every little move that we make. I was like, so why the hell do you do it? Because we just can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
Like you love it. And by the time you're rested and your body feels better, like in April or May or June, like you can't wait to go do it again. You cannot wait to do it again. So I can only imagine what a guy like that must feel like, because he never had a legit shot at a ring. He didn't even get to a championship game, right? The furthest he got was the divisional round.
One and done, yeah.
Yeah.
That was it. So I don't know what his workouts look like. I'm sure that they're still pretty close, maybe 80 to 85% of what they were when he was playing.
He posts pictures of him squatting a lot of weight a lot of time.
Yeah. Right. He's not getting ready to do battle every Sunday, but I'm sure that he's good enough. Like, is this going to be like Eric Weddle a few years ago? Remember when he was literally on the couch and the Rams called him and they said, hey, can you play? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. So as much of a joke as I thought it was, I was like, oh, okay, this is cute. I did think about it. I was like, hot damn, like, how crazy would that be if the Texans, who we all think Well, I know, Justin, you and I think more of them than Bobby does, perhaps. Like, if they're in this thing and they got a shot
Well,
at
I love
being,
the Texans.
where'd you have them ranked?
I think third or fourth in the AFC.
I'll check on it.
Yeah, but I thought
Um,
I didn't think you had them as highly ranked as maybe we did, but possibly. Okay, so sorry, I didn't mean to pot shot you there.
so you sent this topic, and I was like, oh, this is probably like him just saying it. And I went and looked up the clip. I do think he believes it. Now, I think the if you absolutely need it line is key because that doesn't mean like, oh, like I'll come to save the day if you need it. That means
Oh,
you got to guarantee me that I'm a starter, right? That's what that means for him. Like I'm not coming back to be the third defensive tackle. I'm coming back to be a starter. Um, and you think because of the way his last 6 years went, where he missed all those games, like oh man, he just didn't finish on. I mean, he had 12 and a half sacks and 18 tackles for losses last year in Arizona.
It's really
So
good.
I do, I don't think we should spend a 20-minute segment on JJ Watt, but like eh, I didn't think that was a possibility. And this quote actually means like, okay, if they need someone at the end of the season, their defensive tackle room's banged up or whatever, like I'm actually now, I'm going to bring it up on the show. Like they need to call JJ Watt, week 13. That's going to be a talking point for me.
well, all I can remember about the end of J.J. Watt's career was doing the highlights, and every time he would get over 9 sacks, it was like another $500,000 or whatever it was. Like he had a great sack incentive in his
Mm.
contract.
I remember
So-
my college O-line coach said, before that draft, like that guy shouldn't have came out. He should have waited another year. You were wrong, Coach Bakulis. You were dead wrong.
Yeah, well, really? We got to hate on Coach Pakulis?
I love
Come
Coach
on.
Bakulis. He was a good guy. He was hard on us, but he was wrong about JJ Watt.
Can't believe you just called him out like that.
I still think he's like a college O-line coach. He was a good coach.
Is he in your phone?
No, he probably hates me, but
Let's move on to our division. We're picking the NFC West today, not out of a hat, because
good
they
shit
were
talk.
the
All right,
they were
anyways.
they were the second highest ranked division in our power rankings cumulatively.
Yes.
So we'll start with the team that has been atop this division, feels like, for quite a while. The Niners. 2 Super Bowl appearances, 4 NFC title games in the last 5 years. After free agency and the draft, does it feel like there's any slippage with the most consistent franchise in the NFC over that time? Bobby.
No, I don't view there being any slippage at all. I actually think they're better. It's just there's another year past where you got close and missed on an opportunity to get that elusive Super Bowl for Kyle Shanahan, right? And that window doesn't stay open forever. But so you have that core, and God, 49ers, man, they sure as hell have a core. They have a core of Brock Purdy, McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, Bosa, Warner, Chartavius Ward, Hufanga, and then Hargrave. Must be fucking nice. Ayuk, Ward, and Hufanga are the only guys who aren't signed through 2025, or they already have like $23 million in cap space. So they have, even if you don't think about how they're going to work the roster, if you look at it, they have the next 2 years as a very clear window, while Brock Purdy his contract's going to be cheap. And out of those 3 guys, Ayuk, it seems like they're either going to get a deal done or trade him for something. Hufanga is probably the most expendable, and then Ward's going to be 29 years old at that point. So they're still intact, right? 2026 is the year where they have nearly $50 million in void contracts, and you'd have a Purdy contract start to kick in, even though that'd probably be the smallest number that he would have on that contract. But you also have $80 million in cap space that year too. So I think they got better, right? I think getting rid of Steve Wilkes was a great move for them, even though people looked at it as some Super Bowl scapegoat. In reality, that was probably his best game called. And who did they lost? They lost Eric Armstead, who didn't have a very good year last year there.
Hmm.
Greenlaw, we'll see how he is coming back from the injury in the Super Bowl. And then Gibson, the safety. They added Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins.
Mhm.
They lost Chase Young too. I forgot about that. And I like their draft class. Like, you don't look at their draft class and see any stars, but I see like 6 guys who can contribute early, right? Ricky Pearsall, Renardo Green's probably going to come in and compete to start. Dominic Puny, we'll see how he can compete on that offensive line. Still is a weakness. Malik Mustafa and Jair Brown are going to compete at safety. Garendo's going to be a good backup back. And then Cowing, even the receiver out of Arizona, Shanahan could get something out of him. So I actually think they're a better team. It's just that every year that you miss on that opportunity, it makes it harder to get that elusive Super Bowl. I know I went for a long time, but I'm like, actually, I think the 49ers are better than last year.
Now, I agree with you. But the one thing that I'm surprised that they didn't put more of an emphasis on was their offensive line. And particularly the right side of the line, where those percentage of dropbacks where the right guard and the right tackle allowed pressure that were both top 10 highest in the league. Now, you're really nitpicking. I also want to say that you're really nitpicking if we're talking about bad stats for the San Francisco 49ers, because still they were number one in EPA per play on the offensive side of the ball last year. Right now, it also looks like there could be a position battle between Dominic Puny, John Feliciano, and Spencer Burford, who Spencer Burford has not had a great first 2 years in the pros. And he did start last year. Aaron Banks also isn't great either. But here's what I do want to talk about. Bobby, you mentioned the core of players that they have. I don't think you mentioned Trent Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Trent Williams...
I did, but
you
yes.
did. Trent Williams is the most important player, probably besides Bosa on the defensive side of the ball. Most important player to the 49ers' success. In week 6 to 8, and even week 6, I think that's when Trent Williams got hurt against the Browns last year. And then 7 and 8 without him. They were 16th in EPA per play. They were 12th in EPA per dropback, but 21st in EPA per running attempt. And if you just separate week 7 to 8, where they were fully without him, where week 6 he was playing hurt, they were 26th in EPA per rush. And those three opponents that they had were the Browns, the Vikings, and the Bengals. And then after he gets back and after he gets healthy, week 9, they have their bye week. They go on a 6-game winning streak before their big loss to the Ravens on national television. So I agree with you, Bobby, wholeheartedly, where I do think they are better. I love adding Ricky Pearsall in the slot. But if Trent Williams, being 36 years old, he will be 36 by the time that the season starts. If he does continue to go down and he misses time periodically here and there, or if he's playing compromised, I think that is where you can have the 49er offense goes from the best in the league to maybe their top 10, which, hey, for them is still fantastic, but they go from an absolutely dominant team to maybe a team that is compromised and maybe you can beat.
I love the Niners. I'm going to let you in a little secret. You guys know I am a diehard Browns fan, but I do consider myself a little bit of a Niners groupie. I am. I love watching them play. Like, obviously we watch all the games together on Sunday at NFL Network, and I'm watching the Browns most closely because I'm rooting for them. And then I really zero in on what the Niners do. I love Shanahan. I'm a huge fan of his. I love the way they've constructed the team. I do think they did themselves a disservice perhaps on the right side. I know that Puny played tackle at Kansas, and they're kicking him inside. But I can't believe that they went and didn't do anything to try and upgrade from Colton McKivitz. The only problem that they had in week 1 last year when they went in and kicked the crap out of Mike Tomlin's team in Pittsburgh was that TJ Watt just made him look silly.
Yeah.
And it didn't get any better during the season. I'm shocked that I think they brought him back on like a 1-year, $7 million deal. And
they gave him some money.
Yeah, I just am surprised that they didn't try and upgrade either there or in the draft. It seemed a little irresponsible, to be honest with you. I don't know.
I'm surprised by that too. But they dealt with it all last year, and they got to the Super Bowl, and they got, into overtime of winning the Super Bowl. And I think they just made upgrades on their roster compared to some teams having clear downgrades. So that's why I do think it's an issue. And I think if there's anything that holds them back, it is that. But that's why it doesn't alarm me, because we've seen them deal with it. And I think, we talk about Brock Purdy and all the success he's had early on and how much is the scheme players. Well, guess what? The scheme and the players are still there. And Brock Purdy is going to be better, right? Like we forget this is his third year in the NFL, right? We got people, last week we got people being like, oh, can Justin Fields grow under the Steelers? Well, Justin Fields is hitting year 4, right? And was brought on like Brock Purdy's going to become a better player within this year too, with all those good players. So if they stay healthy, I mean, to me, they're the clear front of the NFC once again.
One thing I would like to add, at the end of the year, I would say from the last third on, something that they didn't do well, which they have always done throughout this run, is just pressure the passer with 4. And they, for a while, they weren't doing that successfully. And
I think they're good. The riddance of the departure of Wilkes will help with that a bit too.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree with that. But I also think I like the personnel that they brought in much more than I think there's any sort of pain from the guys that walked out the door. I think Malik Collins is going to help them in the middle.
Huge.
I think that's an upgrade. Jordan Elliott is a solid rotation piece there.
Leonard Floyd's better than Chase Young.
Oh, yeah. Leonard Floyd last year tied his career best with 10.5 sacks. Like, that slid under the radar. And we're like, oh, isn't Leonard Floyd like 90? No, he's still a good pass rusher. And I'm not the biggest Chase Young fan. I just am not. I think that he's more of a name than he is a substantial contributor at this point. And they even brought in Yetur Gross-Matos, who didn't do a ton in Carolina. Yeah. But hey, if he is your 8th best defensive lineman instead of your 3rd or 4th, then we're talking about something. We're just talking about a guy who needs to play 15 snaps a game or something.
Yeah. I just did that because me and Justin have been Gross-Matos haters for like 5 years running.
I get it.
We're also Penn State edge rusher haters too. And it's funny. Ironically enough, the best edge rusher that they've ever produced was a middle linebacker for them. So go figure.
All right.
That's pretty damn good. But yeah, I'm so excited for the 49ers. I'm not excited. I'm not a 49ers fan. But I think they're going to I look at the draft class and I don't think any of them are going to be stars. But I think there's like 6 guys who can legit come in and plug and play. Like they lost Gibson as a safety. I think Jair Brown, who they got out of Penn State, another Penn State guy last year, and Mustafa and Hufanga. Now you kind of have 3 typecast safeties, right? None who are just like great deep coverage players. Hufanga's kind of like they let him roam and make plays. But man, those guys are going to come down and play the run and play sound football behind that front. So I think they're in a good spot. I think defensively they were good in the box scores last year, but I think they're going to have a bounce back year defensively.
Yeah. And the other spot where I thought like they've been weakish is cornerback. I think the good news for Niners fans, I think you're limited in the amount you'll have to see Ambry Thomas hold and pass interfere. So, you drafted a guy in the 2nd round in Renardo Green who had 14 passes defense last year in college. So I think you're going to see him on the field much more than Ambry Thomas if he even makes the team. And you mentioned Isaac Guerrero. I think that he's going to end up being the number 2 back behind McCaffrey. And I think this is the year that they have to start cutting McCaffrey's carries and usage. And I think that this kid, he is a speedster. He ran a 4.33 at the combine. And last year, he scored a rushing touchdown every 12 carries at Louisville. He's got some explosiveness. I think they're going to be smart to utilize him.
Yeah, he's a 49ers running back. He's wide zone, one cut and go back. And that's what Kyle Shanahan does. Like when we talked about Isaac Guerrero, we said, welcome to the 49ers. And what do you know? They drafted him.
All right, let's move on to the LA Rams, who kind of snuck up on everybody last year. We were like, oh, man, what are they going to be, a bottom 6 or 7 team? No. They made it all the way to the playoffs and lost a really, really fun playoff game to the Detroit Lions. Of course, people know about Puka and Kyron Williams and a young defense. The question is, after losing Aaron Donald, but having a really fun draft for the first time in years and free agency, how confident are you that the Rams can give San Francisco a run in the West, Penik?
I'm not confident that they can give them a run in the regular season, but I'm confident that the Rams could be a team that they're going to make the postseason. They will be a wild card team. And then Matt Stafford could play awesome football in the postseason to possibly get them to a place that they want to be.
You son of a bitch. You stole my line.
Wow. Look at that.
My thing was like, they're not going to compete for the division because the 49ers group of talent will simply just run through teams. But they are just as much of a contender for the NFC Super Bowl as any team not named the 49ers.
Yeah. What you saw with Matt Stafford towards the second half of the year was really, really, really good quarterback play, man. Number 4 in offensive EPA per play from weeks 10 to 18 And then Stafford was 4th in EPA CPOE composite. So basically, he was really efficient and he was really accurate all at the same time from weeks 9 to 18. If you look at their overall numbers, it's like kind of average, but I really like Stafford was playing his best football since his really good year, since his Super Bowl year, towards the second half of last year. And I actually picked the Rams to win the Super Bowl last year for that reason. They really made some upgrades to the offensive line. They added Jonah Jackson, paid Kevin Dotson a ton of money. Steve Avila is going to shift over to center, and I thought he had a really good rookie year for an interior offensive lineman. Usually those interior guys struggle. The roster is better, and I think that's the main reason why people were against them last year, is that while also not knowing that if Matt Stafford had any juice left in him and not knowing if he was going to stay healthy, but also you looked at that roster, especially the defensive side of the ball, it's like, man, there's just kind of nothing here. We obviously didn't know about Puka Nacua. You didn't know about Kyron Williams. So now that the roster is better, they should continue to win more football games and dominate some teams, but I don't trust that they could be there with the 49ers, but I trust that they could make a postseason run if Stafford is healthy and everything's kind of clicking for them at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're the number 3 team in the NFC, and I'd take Stafford over any QB in the conference.
I would.
Right? Like 49ers are 1. I do think the Eagles are going to bounce back, right? I'm predicting the Eagles to be the number 2 team in the NFC, and then the Rams will be the 3rd best in my opinion. Number 8 in scoring. I think the addition of Jonah Jackson is going to help a lot with that running game. And again, another team where I just loved what they did with their draft. Right, you add what I thought was edge 1 and Verse. You get a nice penetrating defensive tackle in Fisk. Cam Kinchens, I think, will produce day 1 as a safety for them. And they added Cam Curl as well at that position. And then you have a good back to go with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. So I think defensively, yeah. Will they miss Aaron Donald? Obviously, they're going to miss Aaron Donald. But I think they've put some pieces in to help replace that. And then offensively, I think as long as Stafford doesn't get injured, right? Because even if Stafford's playing hurt, right, there's times where Stafford's playing hurt, and it's like, man, you shouldn't even be playing, because it does make him struggle, right? That's when the interceptions, these weirdly inaccurate passes start happening. If he can just stay healthy, like, he's, to me, the best QB in the NFC, and I'm not even the biggest, like, Stafford fan in the world. I think they can compete with anybody, right? Like, the Lions beat them in a 1-point game in the playoffs.
Oh, that game hurt me.
We'll see how Green Bay progresses. I think the Eagles are going to bounce back, but you don't know. Dallas isn't a threat until they prove they are. Atlanta's fun, but we don't trust that team with that pass rush can compete, go far in the playoffs. And then it's the 49ers. So I think the 49ers, Eagles, and Lions are like battling for that team to take down the 49ers.
Wait, so you think the Rams are better than the Lions?
Yes, I do. I think it's close. I think you go either or, but I would pick the Rams over the Lions right now, even though the Lions beat them by 1 point in the playoffs.
And
do you think
Bobby's power rankings reflect that?
Do you think they're significantly better than the Packers?
Yes, but the Packers have shown that they can win in the playoffs. But I do think if we're talking about like a regular season play, like I think they're a step above the Packers, maybe not significantly. Like the Packers could beat them, and I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Okay, I do think their draft made a ton of sense with what they did. I think adding Blake Corum was fantastic too. That's a really, really good move. And I don't think any of us know how much they're going to miss Aaron Donald. We just don't. Bobby, you follow it obviously much more closely than I do in terms of interior line play and how we're blocking Aaron Donald and stuff like that. I'm just not watching that as much as
and I may be underestimating that too, right? Because it's just like, oh yeah, they were playing like,
right.
That could have a huge impact on their defense, and their defense wasn't great last year either.
No, it wasn't. And here's the one thing that scares the hell out of me if I'm a Rams fan is our corners. The cornerback situation, I think, could just be a total mess. And I'm rooting for Tre'Davious White to get back to 85% of what he was prior to 2 major injuries. Darius Williams has been brought back again. I just talked about Ambry Thomas, and he could be the 5th cornerback this year on the 49ers. Like, I have concerns about 1 and 2, let alone that Kobe Durant or Darian Kendrick is going to be their 3rd guy in. Like, that sort of stuff scares me. if I'm a Rams fan. I just don't know if we're good enough back there.
I can see them being aggressive and at some point making a trade for a corner.
I had that thought too, but they haven't done it yet.
Right.
But you look at like the Lions last year, right? Now the Lions saw that weakness and improved it, but their corner situation was really bad last year. And they were able to get to that NFC championship. So, their corner situation wasn't good either last year. So I think that offense is going to be a top 5 offense in the NFL. They were number 8 last year. I think the additions help, with the offensive line. I think they're going to try and run the ball a little more too.
Yeah, for sure.
I just think this Rams team is, and we forget, like, because Sean McVay kind of gave birth to all these coaches and stuff, like he still is like the godfather of like the young offensive coaching movement, right? Like he's still one of the best coaches in the NFL. Like, and I think you can make an argument that he is the best.
Is he the youngest godfather in the history of sport?
Yeah, I know. I saying that, it's like the man became a head coach when he was 29 years old. I remember saying to my like 29-year-old friend, I was like, "That's like you becoming a head coach. That's ridiculous."
He's 38,
and there was conversation.
Can't be a godfather.
There was conversation,
but he is. He like think about all the guys he's given, like O'Connell, Zach Taylor. There's just so many guys that he's done. Even I know Raheem Morris is older and has been a head coach before, but hey, Raheem Morris just became a head coach from under his tutelage. Staley, how great was he for the Chargers? Under his tutelage. So he's given like LaFleur. So he's just given birth to like a lot of these. He created a movement as far as head coach hiring.
And there were rumors 2 years ago of I don't know if my heart's in it. I think I'm going to retire. Remember that after he won that Super Bowl? Like him and Aaron Donald were going to go out together. It's like, dude, aren't you like younger than Aaron Donald?
Yeah, but you know how much money he could have made being the lead guy at Amazon?
Oh yeah. Oh,
I mean, and not had to sit there and game plan and all that sort of stuff and still be able to walk back into a job whenever he wanted. I mean, that would have been amazing.
He needs to win a second Super Bowl, though. That's the goal he's got to get that second Super Bowl, and then you hit that elite territory.
Well, that roster wasn't looking too hot, and now it's like, okay, well, there's actually stuff to work with here. It's not just
and they're building back, and it's not the same way where they just mortgage the future.
Right.
And last year's draft class is insane, right? Where they had what was their highest pick? And they produced like 5 studs out of it, like with Puka, Byron Young, Kobe. Like they just produced studs out of having the least amount of draft. Like if you look at like draft capital ranking by like value, they probably had the least in the NFL, yet they had an amazing rookie class. So they know how to find guys who fit what they want to do and plug in and play, right? And I think all of their day 1 and day 2 guys are going to do that.
But
yeah, they had Vila, Young, Turner.
Yeah, Vila was the first pick.
Stetson Bennett, which was no
good.
Yeah,
that pick was very stupid. I don't understand that one.
So they had in it. Here's one name to watch this year, by the way. If we could just do the fun. Davis Allen is an extra tight end, but Higbee's going to be out. They brought in Parkinson from Seattle. I like Davis Allen. He's
got size. He can move
out of Clemson. Yeah, good athlete. So I think a year in a pro system, somebody keep your eye on.
Yeah. And in terms of answering the question of the impact of Aaron Donald, I think based on Colby Turner and based on Byron Young's production this year, is Byron Young actually going to be an 8-sack, 19 QB hit guy in the NFL? And is Colby Turner going to be a 9-sack, 16 QB hit guy in the NFL? Or was that just Aaron Donald? I think that if you want to have the experiment of the impact of Aaron Donald, look at what those two guys do this year, Byron Young and Colby Turner, and see how much fall off there is. And then that's the Aaron Donald impact for you.
And that's where if I look back and I'm like, I was too high on the Rams, that's where I could see is where I am. And I'm telling myself in my head, you're underestimating the loss of Aaron Donald, but I just do think they're going to figure it out.
All right, let's move to the third place team from the NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks. Pete Carroll done after nearly 15 years up there in the Pacific Northwest. Michael McDonald bringing a brand new energy and defense up to Seattle. Geno Smith has been having some social media battles. I don't know if you've seen this.
It's with a fake reporter. It's one of these fake reporters.
Yeah, well, so the fake reporter reported that former Washington quarterback Sam Howell is going to get a shot under center. Let's start with this. Do you think that there's any shot, Bobby, that could actually happen?
Not to start the season. If Geno struggles early, you can see them being a desperate. This Seahawks team, man, I don't know what to make of them. Like what I'm doing with the Seahawks this year is I want to see the coaching job, right? Like I'm excited. I'm excited for the coaching additions, right? Mike McDonald, we praise him like crazy. Love him as a defensive coordinator. Now he's the head coach. How well does he do with the defense? That defense, you look down at from top to bottom, they've got a lot of good guys. Like they lack like the all pros. We'll see how Devin Witherspoon jumps into year two. You could see him getting in that range. But like there's really no like weak spots on that defense. But there's also not like the great, top of the NFL all pro talent on it either. The offense, like Geno was essentially the exact same like player from these last two seasons. Like his EPA is identical. He just had like a lower completion percentage. And and they hired a college offensive coordinator. Who, Bobby? Ryan Grubb from the University of Washington, a team that pushes the ball down the field. 21% of Michael Penix's throws were 20+ yards. 36% of their yards came from that. Geno Smith and Howell were middle of the pack of that. Now, here's where it's going to make the difference. Penix was the master of not taking the sack and throwing the ball away. That's something that Geno's good at too, right? Geno only had 3 QB created sacks last year. Only 6% of their pressure was due to him. And Howell was the exact opposite. He was the worst in the NFL. Allowed 15 sacks, 15% of his own pressure. So they've went 9-8 both of the last 2 seasons. They have good talent along the roster. It's just what does this coaching team, what does the coaching do with this team? Because it's kind of an older, middling roster.
I don't know about that. They've had some really interesting drafts the last couple of years. Really interesting. Like I think Boye Mafe he could be ready to explode in this sort of defense.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm a big fan of his. I think they got to figure out a way to get Tariq Woolen back to,
That'll be interesting to see what happens with Woolen.
Right, because I love Witherspoon. I think he's fantastic. Now, let's remember, they lost a lot of leadership and production in the middle of that defense. Bobby Wagner's gone. Brooks is gone, too. And that's, I don't know. That was kind of fascinating.
Brooks, I think, was one of the more underrated, departures of the offseason.
Yeah, but I love what they did with their first 2 picks. They are building from the inside out. I think Byron Murphy has a chance, depending on who's lining up next to him and how they utilize him, to be a star. We know that he's an athletic freak. They didn't have another pick then until the 3rd, but they've got, I know that you guys loved him, in Chris Haynes, right?
Christian Haynes.
Yep.
Right. So, it's not going to be all solved this year, and they're probably going to finish.
I think Byron
with
Murphy will take a little
finish.
time too.
Maybe. I don't know.
And they've got they're going to rotate him, right? I mean, Jaron Reed was really good for them last year. Leonard Williams they paid big money too. Draymond Jones could play. So Byron Murphy, even if he's awesome, he's going to be on he's not going to be getting that full 70 to 80% of the snap count either. So yeah, they do have young players, obviously, but you also have a lot of vets on that team as well.
Yeah, it's a nice mix. I want to go back to the whole quarterback conversation because there better not be any accuracy to this, at least right now, right? Because you have one quarterback that will keep you on schedule, and then you have the other one that will take you off schedule and then drives, whether that's from interceptions or whether that's from sacks. And I'm just a big man, even from your rookie year, I try not to evaluate and judge rookie QBs too harshly. But if something is so bad where if it's like a red flag, that for Sam Howell, and it's his pocket manipulation, it's taking sacks and the turnovers, even though I think the turnovers could very much go down. But the sack rate last year for Geno Smith was 1.8%. And then, I'm sorry, that's it. The interception rate for Geno Smith last year was 1.8%. For Sam Howell was 3.4%. Pro Football Reference does this thing of a adjusted passing. So if you're at 100, that's average. If you're above 100, that's good. If you're below 100, that's bad. So adjusted rating for passing for sacks, Geno Smith was 107, so that's good. And Sam Howell, it was 80, which is really bad, which is terrible. Geno Smith was second in big-time throw rate last year on 20-plus yard throws. That's important because you have Ryan Grubb coming from the University of Washington. And adjusted completion rate, Geno versus Howell, Geno Smith was 13% better on that adjusted completion rate on those deep throws. So I am really interested, like Bobby said. I think it's like the biggest wild card this year about how Ryan Grubb is going to call an NFL offense, because you're not going to call it the same way that you did at Washington. You can't. You have to attack all three levels of the field, and that's not something that Washington fully did, and kind of like a little bit of a faker college system out there in Washington. But you do have DK Metcalf, you do have Tyler Lockett, you do have JSN. So Washington had like those trio of really good receivers that were all drafted last year. But you kind of have that in Seattle with that kind of skill set of some receivers that can go up and really get it. So I'm excited to see what they can do. But in terms of that quarterback discussion, absolutely not.
There is nothing to that.
No.
For goodness sakes, go look at Sam Howell.
Which is why Geno even tweeting about that, but
he's made 29 starts or something like that. I'm sorry, 18 starts in his career. Sam Howell, and he's got 22 touchdowns and 22 picks. No math major. That's not the 50-50 ball I'm looking for.
One of the 4 successful day 3 picks in that 6-year span, though. So credit to him.
So here's where I think the discussion goes with Geno. And I think we should do this later this summer. We should do a power rankings list of where your team's quarterback situation is over the next 3 or 4 years. And I think if we did that, I don't know how high Seattle would be on the list, because it just feels like, I feel like they've got some groups taken care of, and the most important one is a year-to-year deal, and that ain't a great way to go. So
Geno's been good, but yeah, he's not their long-term play there either.
Right, I keep hearing that, even though he's not that old, and he seems to be getting better. Like, yes, there was a little bit dip, but it wasn't like falling off a cliff bad from 22 to 23.
He was also hurt last year too for
he missed a couple games.
Yeah,
he did miss.
You look at his efficiency numbers; they're almost dead even, like EPA per play. I think it was 14th in EPA. So that's kind of where he's at. Justin, sidebar. I just had this horrible thought that we go full circle because the Giants QB situation is unclear for the future, and they might not be able to draft one. Or if Geno came back.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, and sidebar, but Seattle, like I'm not judging this team on like total wins and losses, right? If they gain 1 or lose 1, go to 10 wins or 8 wins. It's just I want to see what this coaching job does and how do these young players grow, right? Like you mentioned, Boye Mafe, he could explode, but he's got to do it. Devin Witherspoon, can he be like an all-pro type corner? Christian Haynes, can he come and start right away? Byron Murphy, how well does he develop? Because you've got a nice, core of vets, right? It's how do the young guys? Does Charles Cross in year 3 become one of the best left tackles, or he's just going to be an above average run? JSN, right? He didn't do a ton his rookie year. He was the first wide receiver off the board in last year's class. So to me, it's like, how does this coaching get these young guys to improve? Because if you can get those, like that core of 6-7 young guys on their team to make decent step ups, then they're a team that we're talking about again, how strong the NFC West is, and the Seahawks would be winning this division and can win a playoff game.
Yeah, one other area I think to kind of focus on, we touched on the corners, the safeties, right? They got rid of their 2 starting safeties. Julian Love is a guy that survived out there. They brought in Rayshon Jenkins, Kayvon Wallace. We'll see. We know what the safeties were all about in Baltimore the last 2 years.
Pro Bowl Julian Love.
Yeah, I was about to say, don't disrespect Pro Bowler Julian Love.
He had a bad year though. That was a weird Pro Bowl selection.
Yeah.
I have a trivia question for you, Chris Rose, because I just found this out today. Bobby knew it. Do you know who the assistant head coach? We're talking about coaching. Do you know who the assistant head coach is for the Seattle Seahawks? I love this, by the way.
The assistant head coach, is he a former NFL head coach?
Yeah.
Yes.
Recently?
No,
but he's a former defensive coordinator for a prominent team recently. Left the NFL for a year and now he's back.
13 seconds.
Is Wade Phillips still around?
No, Wade Phillips is currently a head coach for the Brahmas in the UFL, so that is
okay.
wrong.
Well, then that's no good. That tells you how much UFL I've been watching.
Oh, Leslie Frazier.
Yeah.
Oh,
don't you love that? That's awesome.
Former coworker of mine. Now, there you go.
That's awesome. I love, like, you talk about coaching staff. Like,
Nice man, by the way.
I love that.
Very, very nice man. Move on to the Arizona Cardinals. They are fully behind Kyler Murray at quarterback, at least for now. Wide receiver room improved infinitely with just the selection of one man in Marvin Harrison Jr. Is this team trending up after a boatload of picks or just still kind of waiting in mediocrity? Justin.
Nope. Oh.
Sorry, Bobby.
Well, Bobby's excited to talk.
I'm excited to talk about this division. I want to go first every single time, but you can go ahead, Justin.
I don't really know, but Bobby seems to have an answer. So you know what? I am going to let you have it.
Okay,
So-
you're deferring to the second half. I like that.
He's deferring. So there's nowhere to go up for the Cardinals. I'm excited for their like mini offensive core, right? Of Kyler, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, Trey McBride really came on once they got rid of Zach Ertz and then Kyler Murray came back in the lineup. Like those 8 games with Kyler, he had 53 catches, 538 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And you may say, well, they had no one to throw the ball to in Arizona. Someone had to get those targets. Okay, but he had an 80% catch rate in those games. That volume with that efficiency is nuts. So, the best tight end in the 2022 class is becoming a baller, which we call it, Justin. And then Paris Johnson, right? So you have like that core of 4 guys. We'll see Michael Wilson could be an okay player. Trey Benson, how does he come along? So I like that core of like that young core of offense. It's just on defense they have nothing.
Yeah.
Defensively, they just simply lack talent. Like they have the number 131 defense. They signed Sean Murphy Bunting, and then they drafted Darius Robinson, Max Melton, and then DTD out of Texas A&M, Deidre Taylor Demerson. Those guys can all be solid players, but I don't think anyone's predicting those 3 are going to be game-changing defensive players. So they're going to be a fantasy football team this year with Kyler, Marvin Harrison, and Trey McBride, but the defense is just, it lacks so much talent.
Do you think that they would rather have Will Anderson and that pick back from last year? I mean, holy shit. You don't even have to think of that, Bobby. No eye rolling necessary.
So the pick was, let's look at what that trade ended up being, because it was Darius Robinson.
Yeah, I don't know what else. Let's see.
All part of the Deshaun Watson trade, by the way, I believe.
Yes, that was a piece of the Deshaun Watson trade. To say that Will Anderson is there strictly because of the Deshaun Watson trade, I don't think is 100%.
That's not fair.
Even though that's the direction everybody likes to go, but
no, because the Texans also did like 5 other. They did so much with like manipulating picks. I actually recently there was a CBS Sports article where I saw the fully fledged out Deshaun Watson trade, and it makes you go crazy because it's
it's not accurate because they're double counting picks when they do all that stuff, and it's not fair. I mean, listen, It was a terrible trade, but let's at least report it accurately instead of just saying, look, they got this guy and that guy and that guy. No, you can't say you can't double up everywhere. So it's part of a deal.
Right.
So there's like 2 trades. So like my head is scrambling right now. So they traded number 3 for 12 and then the first. So they traded Will Anderson for Paris Johnson and Darius Robinson, but then they traded up, trading away their 34th pick, a 4th round pick, and they got a couple 3rd round.
It's confusing.
All right, let's just keep it simple. Would you rather have Paris Johnson and Darius Robinson or Will Anderson?
I think I'd rather have Will.
Hi, Will. How you doing, buddy?
It depends on how Paris Johnson, because I liked Paris Johnson. If he can become a stud left tackle, then I would take that just because they needed a stud left tackle. But yeah, if Paris Johnson is just like above average, then I'm taking Will Anderson every time.
Well, let's even talk about this because they have Jonah Williams. He's going to be their left tackle, so Paris Johnson is their right tackle.
Are you sure about that?
Hold on. I've got let me get to their depth chart, please. They do have Jonah Williams listed at left and Paris Johnson at right.
On the Cardinals side or like ESPN or
this is the one that NFL Network sent out right before the draft.
So they're going to keep Paris at right?
Well, so that was before them lining up for whatever first OTA and stuff like that.
So we'll keep track of that.
Yeah,
I'd be disappointed if they kept Paris Johnson at right tackle. I know he didn't have a great rookie year. It got better as the year went along, but
the Cardinals had 7 of the first 90 picks in the draft. Nobody had done that since the 1991 Dallas Cowboys.
Oh,
Now, part
Jimmy
of that
Johnson?
was, huh?
Is that Jimmy Johnson?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
Jimmy Johnson. Now, part of that was the Herschel Walker trade. Okay. So they had the first overall pick. They took Russell Maryland. They had another number 1 pick that year, Alvin Harper, who solid receiver, and then ended up getting a ton of money from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Michael Irvin always reminded me that Alvin Harper should have paid him a percentage of that money because Irv ended up helping him get that. They also ended up getting a third rounder that year, Eric Williams, who was maybe the greatest right tackle we've ever seen, just a beast of a man. So we'll see how these guys end up doing. You know, like I love Trey Benson. Pair him with James Conner. That's kind of a fun backfield all of a sudden. The wide receiver room, I could not believe this stat. You guys want to guess this? How much yardage per game did the wide receivers tally last season?
Including the guys that like they got rid of, like Rondell Moore and Hollywood Brown, counting this?
Wide receivers. So guys, if they ran 3 wides, 4 wides, how much yardage per game did they have?
I'll say 97 yards per game.
The first number.
Horrific.
They threw to the tight ends a lot.
My first number that came to my head was like 71.5.
Jesus. Think about that for a second. We're talking about wide receivers. There are wide receivers who average almost 100 yards per game. 105. So even if you used 3 wides and just ran 3 wides, you're talking about guys that didn't even average 40 yards per game. Like, that's horrible. Horrible.
And they're losing a lot of games because their defense is bad. And
so they got to throw the ball.
Yeah.
Well, there is one rookie I want you to keep your eye on. Tip Ryman. Kid out of Illinois, 6'5", 271 as a tight end. So just kind of fun, interesting dude. Peter Schrager did a big thing about him on the draft.
Adam blocking 10 tight end to go with Trey McBride. I like it. 12 personnel. Let's do it, Arizona. But I think they're going to be a nice little fantasy football team this year. And it's how well does this draft class develop? What do they go do with free agency? But that defense is just so far away from being good.
Yeah. It could end up, who was it that draft? Oh, it was Carolina a couple of years ago where they drafted all defense. Remember that? They didn't have one offensive pick. You could certainly see that coming. As long as that offensive line is okay, you could see that coming pretty soon for the Arizona Cardinals. I'm
actually very interested in this.
What's that?
They're all defense draft. I want to see who they ended up getting out of that.
Yeah, I think it was probably
the 2020 NFL draft. Derek Brown, good. Grossman Toast, bleh. Jeremy Chin, underrated. Troy Pride, bad. Kenny Robinson, bad. Bravion Roy, bad. Stanley Thomas Oliver. I think he's like around on somebody's roster.
But I'm right, right? I'm right about that.
Yeah, you're right. 2020 is all defense.
That was was that Matt Rule's first draft?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
That was the COVID draft, I believe.
Yeah. The 2020 season was not real. Sometimes you look up stats of 2020 season, it's just was literally not real.
Don't tell Tom Brady that freaking 7th ring.
Yeah.
Looked pretty real to me.
No, the offenses, I think the results were real, but kind of
very funny that the first team to ever play a home game for the Super Bowl didn't get to actually have their fans there.
Yeah.
That was the most bizarre. I can tell you this. I've had the good fortune, I think, of covering how many Super Bowls have I been? Maybe a dozen games or whatever. It was eerie walking into that stadium that day. Woo! It was weird. Like you didn't know if you were allowed to be close to people, not close to people. It was just some strange stuff. Very strange. So, weird. All right, so that's the NFC West. Should we
NFC best?
Should we do predictions on order of finish? I think it feels a lot like last year.
Yeah, I feel like we're all going to go chalk. 49ers, Rams, Seahawks, Cardinals.
Yeah. And 2 playoff teams. Right?
Seahawks have the potential to be a third, but yeah, I
gotta flesh all this out because I want to say 3, but then I said this team might make it, and I may have backed myself into a corner saying the Bears will be a playoff team.
Yes, you did.
Well, how about
and,
this? We just thought of an official August-September episode where we will officially unveil our postseason or way too early postseason brackets. We're gonna.
It depends on Stafford. Can Stafford not get injured? Because it seems like every other year he gets injured.
But they got Jimmy G to save the day now.
Yeah, it will be funny to see like Jimmy G in like a great offense with the offensive coaching, and see if he can like even be close to what he was with the 49ers.
I was about to say, don't you think Kyle Shanahan can coach a little bit?
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's still probably like a little bit of a drop off of what he had at the end in San Fran.
Yeah. All I can tell you is that is Mrs. Rose's crush, NFL crush. And when he signed with the Rams, I was like, oh, guess who's moving to LA? Like, when you say that, you usually don't want to make it an athlete. You want to make it like, oh, which friend or which old coworker is now. I was like, Jimmy Garoppolo. She's like, where is he moving? I said, well, honey, I don't know that much. All I know is that he's going to be playing with the Rams. She's like, oh my God. Do you think we could find out where he lives? I was like, okay, now we got to stop this discussion. That's enough.
He lives at Rockingham.
Really? That's where we got to end this conversation?
I rewatched the 30 for 30. I'm watching the People versus OJ Simpson, so he's on the brain.
Yeah.
Don't you have some undrafted free agents tape to break down?
Well, we finished. This is my 2 months where I actually get to watch shows and stuff.
We're done.
All right, good. Good for you guys. All right, so later this week, we are doing our last power rankings before the season. Is that accurate, Justin?
Yeah, post-draft power rankings, and then we'll talk about how much we do during the regular season, but we'll put a bow on it.
I can't wait to see how far I move the Tampa Bay Buccaneers down after the bashing.
Yeah, I might just send the exact same list.
I certainly will not. I will not. I can't take it anymore. All right. Shout out to producer Mikey for putting this whole thing together. Continue to absorb the content from the Talking Giants boys, Penik and Skinner. I am Chris Rose. We will see you Friday here on Football Today.